Welcome to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Uncle Jimmy's podcast, the place where we dig beneath the surface, the place where leadership meets humanity, and where the smartest voices remind us that wisdom isn't complicated, it's personal. Today, I've got a guest who embodies that truth. We're sitting down with Dr. Alan Mueller, senior consultant and co-founder of Adaptive Challenge Consulting. This man has spent years helping leaders navigate the tough stuff, real conversations, emotional intelligence, conflict, cultural complexity, and the challenges that people are usually scared to talk about. Dr. Mueller isn't your typical leadership expert. His background stretches across finance, sales, higher education, hospitality, and he was once a comedian. He's a keynote speaker known for being authentic, funny, and deeply human. He spent a decade in improv comedy, so trust me, he knows how to stay present, grounded, and adaptable. He's got multiple degrees from Appalachia State University, including an ED in educational leadership. He's a Myers-Briggs certified interpreter, a TEDx speaker, and the author of Leading with Emotional Intelligence, a book written not from a mountaintop, but from real-world trenches, where leadership is messy, relational, and deeply human. So buckle up. This conversation isn't about is about leadership. It's about identity, about resilience, and about what it truly takes to show up in a world with emotional intelligence. Let's welcome to the show, Dr. Alan Mueller.
Hey, man, that was a great intro. I feel like I could just leave on a high note.
You could just leave like
peace out.
You know, like the Seinfeld show, like Seinfeld when George comes in and tells a joke and everybody laughs and everybody says, I can go.
It's like, thank you, everybody. Good night.
No, but we're definitely welcome to have you. We're excited. You know, we just talked off camera for
hour.
For a good half an hour, and great talk. You know, you're strong in your beliefs, and tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, where you came from, what you did for work, and what you're currently doing now with the new endeavor you started 4 years back.
Yeah. So, grew up in North Carolina, all over the state. I was telling you before we started recording, my mom's from Indiana and my dad's from Germany. And so if people are listening and they think I don't sound North Carolina enough, then that's probably it. But a lot of y'all from up north probably hear me saying y'all easily. And you're like, no, that gives it away right
How
there.
does the typical North Carolina person talk? They got a Southern twang?
Yeah, so it's a little more southern than me. So and I used to live in the mountains too. And so if you live in the mountains, people talk about going over yonder, talk about the yuns and ussens, and yuns fitting to get some chicken, right? And so like there's this whole dialect, right? But grew up in North Carolina, bounced around the state a fair amount. I got to go to college, was not a great college student at all. It took me 7 years to finish. My GPA was 2.16. So it's kind of a miracle that I got from that to eventually get a doctorate. I've got an amazing wife who's a school counselor for the public schools down here in North Carolina. I got two amazing sons. One's in college up in New York. One's junior in high school who wants to be a veterinarian. And I worked for about 20 years in colleges and universities. And I did the part of colleges and universities that people don't think about. People always think about the classes, but there's a whole world that makes colleges tick. It's the people who run the dorms, the residence halls, or it's the people who run the career center, or the academic advisors, or the multicultural center, or the fraternity office, the sorority office, all the things that make a college tick. We call that student affairs. And I did that kind of stuff for 20 years. The cool thing was I had a very non-traditional path where I spent half my time in the career services world, which is boring resumes, interviews, interview prep, internships, getting it, all that. And I spent the other half of my career in the fun and games department, where I was kind of like the dean of fun at the colleges, where I was the guy who knew where the helium tank was, that advised the students who hosted all the dances and the concerts and all the cultural things and the fun stuff. And I'd be on campus till 2 a.m. And so my career was sort of back and forth between dean of fun and dean of get you a job later. And so, but before my life, I've had a lot of bumps and bruises. Got fired from my first job out of college, sold cars, got fired from that, worked in banking.
Sales?
Well, no, I was actually the number 2 salesperson. So funny story. The owner kept paying us a little bit later and a little bit later. First, it was like the first of the month. Then it was the first Monday after the first of the month. Then he was like, no, it's 2 business days after. And I was like, at this point, you're going to eventually steal a whole month from us. So me and one of the lead salesman and me, so I was the number 2, he was the number 1. We had 12 people. The lead salesman and me, we got people together and we said, hey, we're going to approach him and say, hey, you need to pay us on time. And so we got about 8 of the 12 together. And the 2 of us were clearly the ringleaders. He pulled us up into the upper room quite literally and said, so I heard that y'all gonna talk to me, and if you don't get paid, you're thinking about quitting. Is that true? And then he looks straight at me and says, Mueller. And I'm like, well, if you don't pay us, we need to have a conversation. I said, I don't know that we got to. We're gonna leave here. And he goes, all 8 of you are fired. Get out. So he fired us all. But I've been fired. I've been laid off. I've had to fire people. I've had to lay off people. I've worked in career services. I work with a little nonprofit downtown where we help adults who've lost their jobs, getting them career ready. But about 4 years ago, I left that and left the 9-to-5 security and the health insurance security and all that. And I'm a full-time entrepreneur now. And I have 2 businesses, but the one I'm here to talk about is Adaptive Challenge Consulting, where I do leadership consulting. And my wife sometimes jokes, about what I do. And I say, well, as long as there are bad bosses in this world, I'm going to have some work. As long as there are bad bosses, I've got work to do.
I think you could ship right up to 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. We have a boss up there that might need a little bit of leadership skills.
Need to read a book about emotionally intelligent leadership. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, there's plenty of bad bosses out there, not the least of which is the guy certainly hanging out in the White House right now. And if you're listening to this far in the future, we're in November 2025, just so y'all know who we're talking about. Y'all can look it up.
I'm not gonna mention his name, but we're just gonna tell you what day it is and what year it is.
Keep rolling with it. Yeah. And so now what I do is I go all over the country, and and it's funny because a lot of people, when I was seeking advice, they say you have to find a niche. You got to do one thing. And I was like, you know what? I don't really believe that. And so, literally in the last 45 days, I've worked with a law office in California. I worked with a flavor company with a factory floor that makes flavors in North Carolina. I spoke at the National Pest Management Association of people who own pest control companies down in Orlando. Then I was at the University of Richmond, and then I was at a small community college in the mountains of North Carolina. And coming up in a couple of months, I'm going to Indiana to do some work with a large freight and logistics company for their leadership development. And so the bottom line is, if you're a K-12 school system or a university, if you're a company, if you're a city, I do city governments and municipal county governments sometimes, you're a nonprofit. The bottom line is, usually when there's a new management position open, you look around at the assistant managers, you go, that was the best assistant manager. We're going to put her or him up.
Yep.
But that doesn't always work out, because the skills you need to be an assistant manager probably have to do with customers or clients. The skills you need to be the manager might have to do with budgets and timesheets and
Different
other things. It's a different kind of job. And that's why my company, because people get up there and I fumbled. When I was first a leader of people, I fumbled. I messed up. And if I can save some people some mess ups, I've done a good job,
That's awesome. It sounds like, you've been traversing the country back and forth the last, 45 days and
oh yeah,
speaking to a little bit of everybody. But, the big thing is you're almost shaping and molding, the future leaders of this country. Not even just of this country, of small businesses, small colleges, big business, the pest control industry. You're doing a little bit of everything, just showing people how to be a leader. I think that's great, because oftentimes when, like you said, people often, when there's a manager's position that opens, they take the assistant manager, pop them right up, and they may not have those skills to be a leader. Assistant manager means you're an assistant manager for a reason. You're not the boss, and I find sometimes a lot of people in the workforce, a lot of people that get thrown into these positions, managers, or they're not really leaders.
They're not. And the thing is, managing and leading are 2 different things.
Yeah.
So managing is, you got a task in front of you. You got to get the people organized to do the task. Leading is, you're invested in the people's lives. You're invested in their professional development and growth. You are trying to inspire them to be bought into a bigger vision that's not just the task in front of you.
Exactly.
Now, at the end of the day, does each hopefully get the tasks accomplished that get? Yes, but one is an ecosystem of people who trust each other and work together, and one is a leftover from the Industrial Revolution which is I say it, you do it. And you're just a cog in the system.
In the system, yeah.
And again, one of the things that I tell people too, because a lot of people who do my work, they're like, management's bad, leadership's good. I tell people, I'm like, look, you got to do some of both. You got to do some of both. When I'm talking with people who are on a factory floor, when it comes to safety stuff, you just got to manage sometimes.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to people at colleges who manage when students get in fights or whatever, crisis management, sometimes you just have to manage. But the better you get at leading, the less managing you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And that's the trick of it right there, is if you can start learning how to motivate people, how to listen, how to kind of get different perspectives together, tackle problems in different ways, it's amazing. It's amazing. And one other thing I'll say before I shut up is change your relationship with failure. You're talking to a guy who took 7 years to finish college, barely scraped through, didn't get into grad school the first time I applied, but now I got a bunch of degrees on the wall. And so people are going to mess up. The Google execs have this thing called Fuck Up Fridays, where they pull their vice presidents in and they're like, who had the best mistake on their team this week, so that we can learn from it. And so managers shame you for making a mistake. Leaders ask, what can we learn? What can we learn so we can do better tomorrow? Yeah. And it's a different mindset.
Yeah. And the job that I do, like I said, we were talking about earlier in the union, one of the biggest things I always try to push the company for is, we don't need to punitive or slap this person with missing work. Let's use it as a learning experience. Let's use it as a teaching example of, hey, this guy messed up. So let's teach him, who can show others that, hey, this was the issue. This was the problem. This was the mistake I made. But to make sure we don't do it again, let's learn from it. Because to me, when it comes to, if you're, slapping someone with a 2-day suspension and they're losing 2 days pay, they're not really worried about learning the lesson. They're worried about the two days that's out of their pocket. And
That's right.
So if you can lead and show them, hey, this is a teaching moment, you're not in trouble. But if you see you do it again after we teach you, then it will be different consequences.
You got to get better. And a lot of people, I never studied business, but I've read a little bit about what business programs teach, because I kind of got to be aware of it. And back in the 90s, they had this thing that they called the positive sandwich, right? The positive sandwich is you got to give someone some tough feedback. So first you put down the piece of bread, the metaphorical piece of bread, and the piece of bread is a compliment. Oh, you did really good last week on that thing. Then you give them the meat, which is this is what I got to talk to you about. Then on top, you put another fakey compliment on top, the piece of bread. And let me just say, I get why they came up with that idea. I get that, because people don't like conflict. People don't like to just hit you square in the eyes. But when I do trainings for managers, I'm like, look, you need to ditch the positive sandwich, and you need to do what I call Alan's big old plate of meat. And Alan's big old plate of meat, the plate is important. The plate is, hey, look, I'm about to give you some tough feedback, but I need you to know I'm invested in you. You have value to the company. This isn't a reflection of your value. This is just something that we need to talk about. That's the plate. And then here's the meat. When you make up the fakey compliments, the bread in the positive sandwich, the fakey compliments, people smell that a mile away.
No doubt.
And it feels disingenuous, and the employees they will feel punished first. And when like you just said, when you're feeling punished, your learning antennas or your learning receptacles or whatever it is,
shut down.
It shuts down. It shuts down. And so you got to believe that. But two, it's part of changing an organization's culture.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
When your bosses and leaders show, hey, look, when people mess up, we're not going to laugh and shame. We're going to be like, okay, cool, we messed up. We're all human. How do we address it? How do we fix it as a team? That's it. Just let's get back to the business. And if they messed up today, guess what? It might be one of y'all tomorrow. So why are y'all gossiping and chattering and whatever? We're all human. Unless y'all got a secret robot here that's perfect. If you're
Elon Musk got all those,
right. We are all going to mess up, and so let's stop pretending. I heard somebody call it perfectionist culture. I'm done with perfectionist culture. Yeah,
about it. That's one of the biggest things for me on the railroad is 20 years of being here and seeing the culture.
Yeah.
When I first started here 20 years ago, one of the things was people would always say, "Oh, this place is never going to change. It's never going to change. It's always going to be no. Safety is in the forefront. I tell people all the time, when I'm out on the tracks and we're going to work, I still look both ways, and the track may be secured, which means the train can't come on it, but I'm still looking left. I'm still looking right.
Yeah.
The simple fact is I always think like a train's coming, even if we're secure, even if always.
Always.
But it's the culture that is shifting where I am, which is shifting towards safety, pushing that to the forefront and making sure that all is going hand in hand with the operation. So we definitely have some great things there.
Yeah.
And So we're going to get to some questions. So Dr. Mueller, what life experience pushed you into leadership development and emotional intelligence work?
Oh my gosh. So easily it was my high school marching band. And I was a trombone player, and we were not a great marching band. We were okay, but I wanted to be the drum major so bad. If your listeners don't know, the drum major is the person who stands up on the podium and conducts. It's like the student conductor. And I wanted that job so bad. And I auditioned for it and didn't get it my sophomore year. Tried again my junior year, didn't get it again. Tried my senior year, didn't get it again. And because to me, that was the leader.
That's
That
what
was
you
the
want.
leader of the band. Because literally you're leading the band.
Now, would you have one of those little things like they do at the
People would
orchestra?
have sometimes they'll have a baton, sometimes they'll just use their hands. But I wanted it so bad. As a matter of fact, my mom said that she'd buy me a class ring because she never got one. And she said, I said, I want to wait. I want to wait until I make drum major, because you can put your accomplishments on your ring.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed my hand, but no, there's no class ring to
You
this
don't have-
day. I never made drum major. But here's the thing that I learned about leadership. My senior year, my band director got cancer, and there was these four other students and I just kind of got together informally, and we kept the spirit alive, and we just did the little things to help the band. And fortunately, after about 9 months, his cancer was in remission. We're at the end of the year banquet my senior year. And again, I had these scars from I didn't ever make drum major, and I was never the leader, and whatever.
Pissed off.
Yeah, pissed off, or just kind of like downtrodden, maybe. And we get to that award ceremony, and there were 5 awards that night. 5 awards. I walked away with 3 of them. But that's not the important part. That's not the leadership lesson. The leadership lesson is one of them was voted on by the band, by my peers. So that's part of the leadership lesson. But the big leadership lesson is that the very last award, which I technically won part of, the band director got up there and said, I've always given this to one person, but this year I couldn't. I had to give it to these 5 people. And it was I'm never gonna forget, it was these 4 women: Janine, Amber, Amy, and Beth, and me. He called us the gang. And he goes, never before have I given this award, the Director's Choice Award, to a group instead of an individual. And that was my first leadership lesson right there, was that number one, titles aren't always the drum major had the title. Titles aren't always leadership. Sometimes they can be, but they're not always leadership. And the other thing I learned is the best leadership is shoulder to shoulder with a group. That people always think leadership is about being the person in front. Oh, my friend, it's so much better if it's a group in front, because there's a power in that. Because that's the first thing I learned about leadership. I didn't have the words for it. I hadn't read any books about it. I didn't know. But in my book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, in the beginning of the book, I tell that whole story with a little more detail about how hard it was to not get that leadership position, and then how really surprising and shocking it was to get recognized not only by my peers, but by my director. But the more important nuance was, when I got recognized by the director, it wasn't me, it was us, right? That's the more important part about leadership that I learned, which is, Mueller, get over your ego, man. You want to be standing in front, but life's about to teach you a lesson that it's not about your personal ego. It's not about your personal glory. It's about, did y'all get the job done?
Yeah. And I think one of the things too you learned there was also too is that if you have a great supporting cast around you, that can help leadership, that can drive leadership, surrounding yourself with the right people. Because like you said, obviously that meant so much to you, because I don't know how many years ago that was.
A while.
4 names, like it was yesterday.
Like it was yesterday. And it's amazing. And again, when you're a kid, you don't know what leadership is. You don't know that you're doing it. But that was one of those moments where, and there's more to the story too, but for the sake of time, but I'll tell you this much. I auditioned for drum major 4 times in college. Never got it.
Never got it?
Never got it. Never got it. But it's okay, because, I had learned that leadership is not always about having that title, not always about having that position. You can lead from just about anywhere, so yeah.
No, that's awesome. So I know we're just gonna hit on this one topic real quick.
Sure.
So I know you spent a decade in improv comedy, right?
Yeah.
How has improv influenced your approach to leadership training?
Oh my gosh. So at the end of the day, the number one skill you need as an improv comedian is listening. Listening. People, if you read a book about improv, you'll hear the first rule is the yes and rule of comedy. Tina Fey talks about this. Jimmy Fallon talks about this, the yes and rule. But you can't say yes and to a scene partner if you don't listen first. So if I'm doing a scene, and my scene partner, in the first 30 seconds, if my scene partner says, honey, I don't care what your mom thinks, I think it's too expensive for a 13-year-old. That one sentence established that, okay, I'm honey for a husband and wife, right?
Yeah.
That my mom thinks something's too expensive or thinks something not expensive, and that we got a 13-year-old. And I got to listen, because if my next line is, well, Mr. Peterson, I had that reported on time, I swear, that's not going to make any sense to anybody, because Mr. Peterson, I had that reported, I'm in a whole different scene.
Yeah.
So I got to listen. And so every book I've read about leadership, all the good ones at least, leadership also starts with listening. And that's the thing, is that to do improv, you have to listen quickly and get on board with your team.
Yeah.
And in leadership, it's pretty similar. In leadership, it's pretty similar. A lot of people expect leaders to bring in a vision, and I think that's some BS. I think the best leaders get the dry erase board up and the markers, get the team together and say, hey, team, what is our vision together? And, they help shape it, right? They are the leader. They help shape it here and there. And then they complete it, they get it up on the board, and then that leader goes and sells the hell out of it all over whatever the business is, or college is, or whatever. And so to me, the improv comedy thing, and my newest book, which literally just hit Amazon 2 weeks ago, is called Improv Comedy and the Art of Leadership, where I talk about, and every chapter starts with an improv scene. And sometimes the improv scene goes well, and I try to pull the life lesson for leadership out of it. But sometimes the improv scene goes badly, and the bad part of the improv scene, which is sometimes the funniest thing, right? It's some of the funniest to the crowd, but there's lessons there about leadership, about working across difference, about sometimes leaders can take the fall for their team. There've been many improv scenes where I could go for the funny line, or I could go for the line that I know is going to set up two other people on stage for extra funny lines. And if I do something that doesn't get a laugh, and if I take the fall for them, and they get those bigger laughs, then that's a form of leadership. It's kind of like a servant leadership kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just so many lessons between what you learn to do improv and what you learn to be an effective leader. But to me, it starts with listening.
Listening.
Yeah.
So in your own words, what is emotional intelligence really, beyond the textbook definition?
Beyond the textbook, emotional intelligence is, you have to realize that every person that you're leading is a person, and that every person is deserving of full human dignity, and that they're on their own leadership journey, period, full stop. So a lot of leaders think that they are Iron Man in Iron Man 1. But what I got to tell leaders is, no, friend, you are Iron Man in the very last one. What is that? Infinity War. And you are passing it off to Peter Parker. It is time to pass it off to Peter Parker. So a lot of leaders want their own glory, want their own praise. And that's not bad if it's kept in balance, but a lot of times it's not in balance. A lot of times it's the big egos. And I got to say, just being real about it, us dudes are a little worse at the ego part. We just are, right?
No doubt about it.
And so that's one of the things that, my wife jokes also when people ask what I do, she goes, he does trainings that mostly makes other guys feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's something funny too, right? But yeah, and so to me, it's about, you got to be invested in your people. You can't leading to a goal only. That's not leadership. That's managing. But leading people, because the reality is, I mean, my hope is that everyone listening to this gets to retire at some point. And the question is, who have you inspired? Who have you given some confidence to? Who have you gotten some skill development for? Who have you built up that's the next generation? Most of us aren't thinking about that. We're so busy in our world, we're not thinking about the next generation. And leaders are always thinking about, I used to tell people all the time, whether it was my students, whether it was coworkers, I would say, look, 25 years from now, none of us are going to be here. What's the decision we can make now that the people 25 years from now will go, well, that makes sense. That still makes sense. Because it's not about our egos anymore. It's about us, it's about what I call the stewardship mentality. We're stewards, right? And so if you're a steward mentality, it's a different ball game. Takes the personal ego and doesn't eliminate it, but kind of puts it in its place,
Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest barrier that keeps people from leading with emotional intelligence?
Oh my gosh. Well, so ego is part of it. Also the desire to be right, which I think comes from ego, right? And I do some work with the Myers-Briggs personality type, and there's sort of 16 different types. There's a couple types in particular that just have to be right all the time. They're stubborn. And so the ego thing is part of it. And also, I got to tell you, people are scared to admit that they don't know something. They're scared to admit that they're wrong. And I'm going to get real again here, because every leader listening, to say, I don't know, when your followers are asking you something, that takes courage. It takes courage and guts. Yeah. So number one comment is, when you say, I don't know boldly, and then just throw one word at the end of it, which is the word yet. So boldly be, I don't know yet. I'm going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. That's number one. Number two, though, you heard me say that it takes courage to say, I don't know. I'm a white dude, right? At the end of the day, if I say, I don't know, it takes courage, right? If I were a woman, I think it might take twice as much courage, because when women say, I don't know in the workplace, they probably pay an extra price of people murmuring later, well, is she competent, this, that, or the other, or Black people or Latino people or any group that's kind of got a little bit of an uphill climb in society. It takes courage for all of us. I think it just takes a little extra courage in some of those communities. But I'm saying to everybody, hey, y'all, it's time to get courageous. It's time to get courageous. Because when you say, I don't know, and then firmly say the word yet, we're going to figure it out, man. We're going to figure it out, my friends.
It's great to hear yet, because, when I get a call, about, whether it's an issue or contract or whatever it may be, and I tell them, hey, I don't know, but give me 24, 48 hours with the right answer, but I can't answer that. And they're like, well, I need an answer. I don't have it. I'm not giving you the wrong information, but find the correct language, and I'll send it to you. And that's what I try to do is, being, vice president of my local, of trying to, lead that way of, hey, I'm not going to steer you in the wrong direction or give you, because, somebody could be calling about a simple rule at work and say, yeah, well, you can do it. And then they do it. And the manager says, well, you're not supposed to do that. It's against the rules. Who told you? Oh, my vice president did.
And then all of a sudden,
then it falls back on me, So I always tell them, I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers.
No, who does?
I'll get back to you,
Yeah. And I like to oh, sorry to interrupt. But
no, go ahead.
Yeah. But like I don't know yet, but I'm going to get back to you. That's leadership right there. That's leading, because it's not saying, I don't know, go figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's not saying, I'm going to make something up. No, it's honest, which is, I don't know. But it's also leadership, because it's like, but nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to figure it out. We're going to find out.
Yeah. And I always tell them 24, 48 hours. And I say, look, after we get off this phone call, but do me a huge favor, text me. So I have the text, and it reminds me, because, oftentimes you probably get it too. You're being pulled in 1,000 different directions. And if you're not the last person to pull me,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Forget about it. Because
always.
We live in the world now where everybody wants a quick response. Everybody wants, your attention. Everybody wants, I want you to email me. I want you to call me. And it's like, okay, there's only 24 hours in a day, though. I can only do so much,
It's so funny because, when I was in high school, it was the 80s. I remember working in the 80s, and there weren't these distractions, and there wasn't this expectation of instantaneous everything. Dude I knew he taught at a university down the way, and some student wrote him an email at like 4:55 p.m. on Friday. And then on Monday, he had an angry email at 7 a.m. saying, I wrote you, 2.5 days ago. Why have you not responded? And the professor, I guess maybe, I don't know how tenure and all that jazz. I was never on that side of it. I guess he had tenure, like job security. And he wrote back and he said, no, this was not 2 days. This was eight minutes of work time, because I have family and friends, and I go to restaurants, and I have a life outside of work. And somehow in the 70s and 80s, we all just got, that was fine. We were all cool with it. And then as soon as email shows up, everybody's like, well, we better get faster.
Imagine the university now saying if the professor said that to somebody, they'd be in trouble.
I'm telling you. Yeah. So I think it's good when people, when they can, set some good boundaries, good boundaries, and be like, and I own 2 businesses, and I sort of moonlight in a third one. And so I'm juggling a lot. And there are times when I have to say to one, yes, I can do this, but it's not going to be today. It's going to be within the next 2 to 3 days. And if that's not good enough, move to your next option. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of when I'm a contractor, sort of, but because, I don't want to get in their way. I don't want them to have to wait for me if that's not going to work for them. But also, I got to be real about my capacity. I burned myself out for 20 years in a row. I'm not going to do that anymore.
And you can pick and choose now what you're going to do, what you're going to work on. That's great. So you're known for your relational, humorous, and real approach. How does authenticity change workplace culture?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I think it starts with some humility, right? And the humility is, number one, 50 years from now, wherever you're working, you're not going to be there anymore. You're not going to be a picture on the wall, probably. You're not, so that's a thing. Number two is, and I don't want to get too much into it, because I know people get a little nervous talking about gender and talking about race and stuff. But if you know that your life's, I think all of our lives are hard. But if you have a life that's not made harder because you're a woman or because you're a racial minority, if your life's not harder for that reason, add a little extra humility to it and just be like, you know what, people, I'm not in those shoes. I don't get it. In my TED talk, I talked about I worked at the oldest women's college in the country, and it's funny. It's called Salem, and it's in Winston Salem. It's not in Salem, Mass.
Yeah.
It's called Salem College. And in my TED talk, one of the things I talked about was for the first time in my life, I worked in a building where upstairs there was a women's room, restroom, multiple stalls, downstairs, multiple stalls. There was one bathroom I could use as the guy, right? Because it's a women's college. And I mean, we had a few guys on the staff, but not much. There was one bathroom, it was single use. And if someone was using it, it would be locked and I'd have to wait to go to the bathroom. I'm going to tell you, Uncle Jimmy, can I call you Uncle Jimmy?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, Uncle Jimmy, I had this revelation. I was like, man, it sucks waiting for the bathroom. And then I had an immediate follow-up revelation, which was my wife's been waiting for 47 years. So what I did for this is what my TEDx talk is about, is I got out a calculator and I thought, how many kids' concerts, sporting events, Broadway shows, crowded restaurants do we go to in a year? I'm like, probably about 40-ish. I multiplied 40 times I'm like, how long do I see women waiting in the line for the bathroom? I'm like, probably 10 minutes, maybe.
Video.
So I multiplied 40 times 10 minutes times my entire life, man. And it turns out that like I have like 2,700 hours of not waiting in the bathroom time. Like, so when you think about it, it makes me a little bit more humble. I'm like, I've never been late to a meeting because I had to go to the bathroom. Like, well, I mean, until I was at this college, a couple times at this college, the bathroom would be locked. I'd leave in 5 minutes before my meeting, go to the bathroom, and it wouldn't work out. I'm like, shit, this is not good, man. Like, and I'm like, yeah. And my wife is like, oh, poor baby. You had to wait. You had to wait to go to the bathroom at work for 4 whole years when you were at that college. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right. And so anyway, just keep it a little bit humble. You know, I think it's yeah.
So what does emotional intelligence look like when leaders are under pressure or in moments of failure?
Yeah. And so number one, under pressure, I think leaders need to be able to step out, right? Because when you're under pressure, you do some damage. And in the Myers-Briggs, people don't know this, but there's a deeper side to the Myers-Briggs if you really, really get into it, where it talks about how you manage stress. And one of the weird things that happens is, in the simplest terms, the thing that makes us the most us in the Myers-Briggs, the opposite is the Hulk version of us. Like we each have a Hulk in there, but the Hulk is like the opposite of our best part. And so when that happens, man, we hurt people, we say things. And so I use the Myers-Briggs to help people manage stress, because when you're under pressure, and then, when you mess up, own it immediately. Because here's the thing. When you say, yeah, I messed up, that takes away the power from anybody else who's waiting to go, oh, you messed up. Also, like those people, first of all, I don't want to work around those people most of the time, because they're celebrating other people's misfortune. What's that about? We don't need that. But number two, if you got some of those folks in your organization, which we do, if you're the first one, you make a mistake, you're the first one up to the podium, so to speak, or up to the microphone, or just in front of the group, says, hey, you know what? I messed up bad. Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to work on fixing it. Like, and just when you own it, it steals the thunder from anyone who's trying to tear you down, because you owned it, right? Yeah. Talk about politicians for a second. Could you imagine if politicians did this? If they just, and I've seen a few, and not right or left, but folks like Bernie Sanders is one who I think no matter whether you're right, left, or center, I think that people at least respect that he's got integrity, right? People respect that. Whether you agree with his views or not, people look at him and go, yeah, no, he pretty much lives what he's talking about, right? Yeah. And that's rarer these days, but just owning it. When you mess up, just be like, yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I like to say, this is just a quick point, right, about politics in general. So I like to tell people that, thanks to the Democratic Party, unfortunately, choosing Hillary Clinton in 2016 instead of Bernie Sanders, we have Trump.
You're on it.
If we had Bernie Sanders in 2016, we would never have had Trump 2.0. We never would have had Trump 1.0 or Trump 2.0. But yeah, that's a story for another day.
Can I add one little wrinkle to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
As a Southerner, I'll tell you this. The miscalculation that the Democratic Party made, and they've made this a few times, is that Hillary Clinton won all those primaries against Sanders in red states that we knew were going to be red anyway, like South Carolina and Alabama. And so the myth is that you're going to scrape away. And I'm like, but did y'all see Ohio and Pennsylvania? Because they seemed kind of excited about that dude from Vermont.
Oh, no.
And Minnesota and Michigan seemed a little bit excited about that dude from Vermont. And maybe you should be thinking about that instead of imagining you might win South Carolina. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the toughest part, because I think a lot of decisions, and back in 2016, Clinton Foundation was helping out with the Democratic Party and funding
Yeah.
so much.
Yep.
So back to leadership.
Yes.
How can leaders stay self-aware when life and work get overwhelming?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm
That's-
sorry because I don't think I didn't send you the questions.
No, but that's one of the biggest questions. One of my dear friends and colleagues, she works for my company some. Her name's Dr. Kelly Dixon, but everybody calls her Dr. K. And she is this she's a force of nature, Dr. K is. And will always show up in a suit and her Nikes. She's just awesome. And when she did her dissertation studies or whatever, she researched how self-aware leaders are.
Oh.
And how the people who are led by leaders, what percentage of them think their leaders are self-aware? My friend, it is a low percentage. 15%. 15% of leaders are thought of as self-aware by the people they're leading.
Yeah.
So how do you get there? I'm not going to say buy my book, but you could buy my book. That'll help. But there's a lot more to it. If you go to counseling, go to counseling. If you have a spiritualizer, go talk to your spiritualizer. But the thing is, you got to look in the mirror and you got to be honest about what am I good at?
Yeah.
What am I not good at? What am I not good at that I could get good at? And what am I not good at that I don't have the time and energy to get good at? You got to just be honest about it. And that's hard for people. It's hard for people because we all think of ourselves as our next future best self. That's how we think of ourselves instead of what am I good at? What am I not good at? Right. And I can tell you right now, I am not a good dancer. I can tell you right now, I am not good at chemistry or biology.
You're not a good band leader either.
not a good drum major band leader. But I tell you what, get me. No, you're right. But put me up on a stage with a microphone for a keynote speech and let me rock and roll that thing. And I finally found the place where I sort of belong, you know?
No. And that's one of the big things is, here you are going out, like I said in the beginning, you're going out to all these, whether it's a conference, whether it's just a business, and you're teaching the future leaders, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, I haven't really heard much of, people teaching the future leaders because I think a lot of people look at leaders as they're born that way or they're natural.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think there's such thing as a natural born leader. I think, your trials and tribulations and your, trials in life that you go through make you a leader.
I think you're right. And I mean, I think there's a few people that just from the get are kind of that, but I think 90% of it is the grinded out leaders. That's 90% of real leaders. They didn't come out with just magic. I think there's a few of those people in society, and yay for them.
Think there are a few that are naturally born?
I mean, I think when I look at, I think there are some people that have a presence that they've had since they were kids. And this is not going to be talking about politics for a second, but Harry Connick Jr., man, and I don't know much of his music, but when he gets on a stage, he owns it, right? Beyonce, I don't know much of her music, but when she gets on a stage, she owns it. There's a certain presence that you've got.
Yeah.
I was working with this giant international leadership organization. I was trying to get them to bring me in a little bit for some gigs, but they pulled me in to teach improv comedy to teach people about how to have leadership presence, just be stage presence.
Yeah.
How do you get in front of people and not get nervous and not say, oh, public speaking is terrifying, right? Jerry Seinfeld has this joke. He goes, the number one fear among the people in the U.S. is public speaking. The number two fear is death. And so public speaking,
true.
It's scary. And so, but I think that there are some people, and it's not many people, but it's some of these people from history that JFK, maybe Martin Luther King Jr., maybe some of these people who, God or the universe just smiled on them and they just had it from the get. But like I said, I firmly believe that 95% of the leaders out there who are good leaders, they built it. It's a skill. It's a set of skills. It's a thing you grind out. It's a thing you do. I forgot what your original question was now.
So it was, we were just talking about, you said, I asked, how can leaders stay self-aware when life and work gets overwhelming?
Yeah.
So we were talking about that, but then we were just talking about natural. I said, I don't think there's many natural born leaders, and you said there's a few, but I don't think
it's rare,
but like, I don't know if I was talking to the last guest I had on, or I had told you I had met Obama.
Yeah.
And talk about a presence. When I was in the room with him, I was in a room of, he was at a political event campaign, not his campaign. It was after he was president.
Okay.
And there was like 1,000, 1,500 people in the room. When I tell you, he went around shaking everybody's hand, talking to everybody.
Yep.
And meeting him twice, and this was the second time, where I tell you, in a room of 1,500 people, he made me feel like it was just him and I in that room.
He has that kind of presence. And two, the thing about that's different than Trump, that's even different from a Hillary Clinton,
Yeah,
is that there's genuine empathy and care.
no doubt about
And two, the other thing is, and this is something I teach a lot of executives how to do and mid-level managers. And remind me to tell you a little bit about executives versus mid-level managers, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you about it in a second. But there's two different skills. One of them is listening. You got to be able to listen, and we've already talked about that. There's a whole second skill. That second skill is called making people feel heard.
Okay.
That's a whole separate skill. My wife, who's more introverted, she's a counselor. She's very good at listening, but she's not always good at closing the loop and making you feel heard. And with leaders, man, I tell you, number one, you got to learn to listen first. But number two, when you're listening to someone, give them a few cues. Give them like, yep, I get you. I understand. I hear you. I got you. I got you. Give them those cues back. That's a separate skill set, right? The thing I was going to say about executives versus mid-level managers, what you were just talking about, that a lot of companies they're not training future leaders. They wait till someone's a vice president. Those vice presidents get some training. So whenever I'm working with vice presidents and doing a training, they always say, man, I wish I had known this 10 years ago. And I say, okay, freeze, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Who in your company now might be in this seat in 10 years? Let's go train them now.
Yep.
Let's go train your mid-level managers now.
Yeah.
My dissertation, when I was doing all the academic stuff, was on emerging leader programs. It was not people who are training people who are already in leadership roles. It's how do you train people before they're in the big seat, right? And so that's what I studied, is how do you train people before they've gone and made a mess of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, is instead of training them, if they get the big job, then you're going to train them. Well, that's trial by fire.
Right.
If you're training them 5 years before, knowing that, hey, you know what, this guy plays a key role in our company, that, we know he's going places. So let's give him, and sometimes some companies will be like, unfortunately, they'll be like, oh, we don't want to spend the money. We don't want to waste the money, but it's not wasting. You're investing in the future of your company,
You are.
And
Yep.
that's the hardest part, and then we're gonna segue over now to Adaptive Challenge Consulting.
Yes.
So, what inspired you to co-found Adaptive Challenge Consulting?
So really, I had done every college where I had worked. I had done a leadership program for first year students, freshmen, first years. After working 4 years at a women's college, I can't call them freshmen anymore because they're like, fresh what? And I'm like, no, first years. And I'm on board. I'm on board. But I did a lot of leadership training, and then every once in a while, somebody from a local chamber of commerce or a local business or a different college, or someone would see me at a conference. They'd say, can you come teach us some of these techniques and how you're doing this? And at some point I realized, it was time for me to do the next thing. And so I started, I had been training younger adults, and then I was like, it's time for me to train working adults. Like it's just, I've learned enough. I've read just about every book you can read about what leadership is and isn't by every leadership expert everywhere. And some of them I spoke of favorably in my dissertation, and some of them I kind of challenged in my dissertation because I'm thinking there are different ideas on leadership. But also, I had a lot of bad bosses. I worked a 9 to 5, or really it was like a 9 to 9 most of the time. But I
Salary too.
worked for somebody for the better part of 28 years, and that's great. I think I waited tables. I feel like everybody should wait tables at some point, because you get humble about every future waiter that's ever going to wait on you. I sold cars. I was a bank teller. I was a loan officer. Like I was a pharmacy technician. I've done the things. And I'll just say that over those years, there's so many bosses that if they just learned a couple more skills, they could have been fantastic, right? The difference between mediocre and good is not that much, but you've got to be proactive about it, right? The difference between bad and mediocre, if you're bad and you're just trying to get mediocre, it's not that much, but you just got to work on it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is back to what I said at the beginning. As long as there are bad bosses, I'm going to have work.
And I think, like you said, one of the biggest things is being proactive instead of reactive.
Yes.
If you're proactive, you're not going to have to be reactive, because you're not going to need that.
I wish I had known that in college, because I was very reactive in college the first time, and you see what that got me. Yeah.
So what's one transformation you witnessed in a client or organization that still moves you today?
Wow. I was part of this association, and again, this is going to go to gender and race a little bit.
No
I
worries.
was in this association, and I was the president of the association. It was like a professional association. Again, I mentioned earlier in North Carolina, we don't have unions for educators. There's a weird law, but I was the head of the association for all of student affairs in the state, right? And so that was my role. I was the president. And so there was a young woman who I saw at one of our conferences, and she was speaking to the room, and she just had a presence. And I went up to her and I said, and by the way, for this story to make sense, you also know she's a black woman and short, 5 foot, -2.5. And I went up to her and I'd like to talk to you about playing a leadership role in the association. And I said, we're thinking about a new vice president. And she goes, like a vice president for diversity and inclusion. I said, no, just vice president of our organization. And she paused and she goes, just vice president, like not because I'm black or a woman, not like you're not coming to me to check the DEI box or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, no, I think you might be a good vice president.
Be
And
a great
I
vice
think
president.
I could help train you and get you, and literally, and I didn't know this story was going to happen. She and I, we met this morning actually, and she's been, and that was easily 15 years ago. And she and I met this morning, and she's doing amazing things now. She never ended up working with my organization because she had other things that she was involved in. But I think the lesson was that I was just looking for great leaders, and because higher ed, especially in the early 2000s, was on a diversity and inclusion kick, right? Definitely. And she was used to everyone approaching her because she checked a box.
Yeah.
And I approached her not because she checked a box, or not because she checked the box she was used to, but because I just thought she checked the leadership box.
Yeah, exactly. And you thought she'd be a great leader, and you could help her, you could shape her, mold her into that future leader that you thought she could be.
Yeah. And I'll tell you,
No color, no nothing involved. Hey, she could be a great leader.
right. And it wasn't until like 3 or 4 years later that she told me, she goes, you're the first person who ever approached me just because it was me and not because, and I was like, okay, well, that kind of sucks, but yay. I mean, like, good that, but that was,
number one, you weren't approaching her because of her color or because she was a female. You approached her because you thought she had the leadership qualities that you could shape and mold. And that's
exactly. And yeah. But that's one that I definitely remember. Yeah. Pretty transformational.
No, that's awesome. And so what are the most common leadership blind spots?
Yeah. The lack of listening is number one, right? Because people don't listen. One of the things I mentioned, I'm a kid of an immigrant. My dad's right off the boat German. And one of the things that's really cool about the German language that's different from English and Spanish, because in English and Spanish, the verb is at the beginning, right? But I'm going to tell you a sentence I'm going to say it in English, but I'm going to make the sentence like the Germans order everything. You tell me that my point is that Germans don't tell you what's happening until the end of the sentence. So listening, Germans listen longer. People in the US interrupt each other more. And so here's a German sentence. Well, it's in English, but okay. Me and your sister with 3 pounds of Jell-O and 2 bags of concrete did a photo shoot at the mall. Did you have any clue what we were doing with 2 pounds of Jell-O and 2 bags of concrete? No. So you're not going to interrupt, because if I said I did a photo shoot with your sister in the mall, you're not going to learn. And so Germans put the verb. And if any of your listeners don't remember that, you don't have to remember German. You can just remember Yoda, because Yoda's the same. He always says, puts the verb at the end.
At the end.
But my point is that people interrupt each other all the time. And, men were a little worse at this than women, but everybody does it. I mean, it's a cultural part of the US culture, right? And so I think that waiting and listening till the end is one of the first ways you can chip away at those blind spots.
Yeah.
Because you might find out some interesting things by the end of the sentence.
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest things right now as a country and politics in general. And I hate to circle back to politics, but I think the things we've gotten away from is listening to each other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a real life thing I used to with students. They call it a values continuum. But I would have this student leadership group, and I would put them in a line and march them around campus. And I'd say, okay, get off. We called it get off the bus. We pretended they were on a bus. Said, get off the bus. This side Coke, this side Pepsi. And the Coke side would get on the Coke side, Pepsi side. And I'd say, here's the rules. You can only say why you support your side. You cannot trash the other side. You can only speak to your side. So we do Coke and Pepsi, and then we do mountains versus beach. Cool. Then we do abortion. Then we do gun rights. Then we do And so my job, my job as the facilitator is, a lot of times I'm like, okay, abortion, those of you who think it should be legal over here and shouldn't be legal over here. when you hear people and they can't attack the other side, that's against the rules. They can only advocate for their side. You hear about their values.
Yep.
Well, guess what? Whether it's abortion or guns, I'm going to go ahead and spoil something for you. Everybody values freedom and everybody values life.
Yep.
But guess what? The proportions of how they show up on the different issues is what divides us, and the yelling and not listening is what divides us. Because if you think about it, and again, I'm not going to, I have very firm opinions on each of these, but I'm not going to say those. But the point is that if you ask people who are very, very pro-gun rights, they're going to talk about their safety, them protecting their lives and their freedoms.
Yeah.
If you talk about people trying to protect abortion rights, they're going to talk about their physical safety, their rights. And so in other words, we value the same things, but the media and politicians have an incentive to have us angry at each other. Because if we're angry at each other, they don't realize how much they're charging us for potato chips anymore.
Exactly.
Right? And we don't organize around why is it that like a grilled cheese sandwich costs $4 now? Right? Or that's North Carolina price. I can't imagine Boston, right? But they do this because and this is part of what I do, even with companies. One of the things I do is I have a whole workshop on working in a polarized office, where I get people to try to listen to each other and realize that their values are the same. And then if you could start there, you can still have disagreements, but you can build on some agreements too. I do this thing with companies called shared expectations. We get out the dry erase board and a marker, and I'm like, how do you want to treat each other at work? How do you want to be treated at work? And we get it all up on the board. And I say, this is your way. This is your compact. This is your agreement. Take care of this agreement, right? And so that kind of thing, where I'm asking them to build what they agree on instead of yell at each other for what they disagree on.
Yeah.
It's leadership and politics. Like, in other words, it's some of each.
Leadership's gone out the window when it comes to politics nowadays. Forget about it.
I think that there's a few here and there. Corporate interests have more money, and leadership, all you get is a good night's sleep. So so the politicians are like, do I make lots of money or do I get a good night's sleep?
Yeah.
And sadly, too many of them lean on that first.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say between Democrats and Republicans, we have to all realize that we have much more that unites us than divides us.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll tell you this.
That's one of the hottest things, people don't realize, because I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. We're going to fight and argue with each other. No, let's listen. Let's have the adult conversations. Let's really talk it out, because that's what our country was built on. That's what our country was founded on. Let's talk. We don't need to
talk it out.
Argue. Let's talk it out.
And I'll tell you something, because, I spent 20 years in the mountains of North Carolina. And of course, a lot of people listening know that a hurricane hit just about a year ago. And trust me when I say, when I'm in my truck running water up the mountain, as we say, when I'm running water up the mountain or supplies up the mountain, Democrat and Republican doesn't matter. I'm giving water to humans in need. And it's sad, but it's also inspiring in a way that when a natural disaster hits, even though that is us at our worst, it's also sometimes us at our best.
At our best.
And that's the thing, is that it's at our worst in terms of need, but it's at our best in terms of community and being a neighbor.
Yeah. How can organizations build emotionally intelligent cultures across differences?
Oh my gosh, hire me. Just kidding. So, but for real, I think that one of the things you got to do, you got to find a consultant, but it's not just a consultant. Maybe it's books, maybe it's online courses. You got to sit down and you got to try to figure out what your team actually needs. One of the things that's interesting to me is when I get on calls with folks, a lot of the managers will say, well, we need this, this, and this. And then I ask a few more questions and I'm like, you just told me A, B, and C, but let me just go ahead and tell you that B and C are usually a symptom of D. Do y'all have D happening at work? And then they'll be like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, yes, let's fix that. And then B and C will take care of itself. A lot of organizations, they see the symptoms, kind of like a cold. You see the symptoms, but if you're not a doctor, you don't know what's causing them, right? And so that's where I come in, is I'm like, hey, I can help you if gossip, a polarized work environment, if bullying, if harassment, whatever it is in your work environment that's negative, it probably comes from other stuff. My job is to help you dig up the other stuff so that y'all can move past it.
Yeah. No, that's great. So we got a couple more questions. So what motivated you to write Leading with Emotional Intelligence?
Okay. So this is funny, and this is not a heroic story. So just buckle up. I was speaking I do a lot of keynote speeches, but I kind of want to do more keynotes. But I'm so busy with workshops where I'm really working with companies that I don't do as many keynotes as I used to. And I was talking to this woman. She was like a speaker rep, like a representative. And we were talking about maybe having her represent me or whatever. And it didn't work out. But she said, when you're on stage, what are you selling? And I said, when I'm on stage, what am I selling? I ask them what their topic is. And if I'm a good fit, they give me a check and I do a speech. And people aren't used to having an improv comedian as a keynote speaker. So they laugh and then they learn some things and they feel challenged, but they also feel seen and, whatever. And then I leave. She goes, yeah, but what are you selling on the stage? I'm like, what do you mean selling? She goes, do you have a book? Do you have an online course? I was like, no, I don't have a book. I don't have an online course. She goes, write a book. So, and the funny thing, let me tell you this real quick, probably about 2002, when I first got Gmail, or 2004, I don't remember when it was, I thought, what if I wanted to write a leadership book one day? I thought that to myself. And so what I did is I created a Gmail called Alan's Leadership Book at gmail.com. And for 21 years, Jimmy, 21 years, anytime I saw a good leader in politics, in a faith community, somewhere where I was working at a college or university, I would write a little story about good leadership or bad leadership, and I'd send it to that email. Wow. Never opened it for 21 years. And in 2024, I finally opened that email. And I had story after story after story. And I could even tell the early stories were Alan, who had just gotten his master's degree and was fresh in.
Yeah.
And then 8 years later, that Alan had a different thinking on things.
Yeah.
By the time I was getting that doctorate, which was hard, it was a very hard work. My thinking was even more, it just changed as I changed, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you, that book, it sort of wrote itself. But the other funny thing is that email address, I still have enough content for like 8 more books. Like,
so that book was 21 years in the making.
21 years. And sometimes I'd go a whole 6 months and never send an email. And then sometimes I'd go 2 weeks and there'd be 5 emails in that week. Because I'm noticing different things. Yeah. And so that was the beginning of it. And now I have something to quote unquote sell from stage, which is kind of neat too, helps me pay my kids' college tuition.
Hey, that's what it's about,
Yeah.
So what takeaway do you hope every reader walks away with?
Oh my gosh. I hope they walk away with that. First of all, you got to listen. You got to be humble. You got to develop. And I use an acronym in the book, LEADING. Listening is empathy. D is development. I is intercultural awareness. N is navigating the emotional expectations of your coworkers. And G is the growth mindset, which is the growth mindset is you're going to mess up. We're all going to mess up. Let's treat it like a learning experience. Okay. So listening, empathy, awareness. I mean, those are the things that build emotionally intelligent leaders,
Yeah. Nope. That's great. So we got 2 more questions for you. So what chapter or idea was the most personal or vulnerable for you to share?
It's funny because this didn't make it into the book, but it was in an early draft. I ran a career center at a college, and I also had been invited to be on the board of this nonprofit that works with out-of-work adults. So I'm on the board of this nonprofit that works with out-of-work adults. That's our mission. I run a career center at a well-established college, and then I got laid off.
Wow.
And talk about, God or God's universe or whatever makes sense of the world winking at me and saying, dude, I don't care how many degrees you've got. I don't care what your title was. You better stay humble.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I ran a career center. I helped people get jobs. I volunteered and was on the board of this nonprofit where we help people get jobs. And I go home the next day and I'm sad and I'm depressed because there's this thing in psychology where men, when we lose our jobs, it's a lot tougher for us than it is for women.
Okay.
Because a lot of men think that your job is who you are.
Yeah.
And most women, the psychology of women, it's more your job is a piece of who you are, but it's a piece that's with like 10 other pieces. And men, we trick ourselves into thinking our job is all we're worth. And it was a tough time. And I'm sitting there on my couch going, I've coached hundreds of people getting jobs who've lost their jobs, whatever. And I don't know where to start. For me, I don't know where to start,
Yeah, it was probably just a big shock to the system, like, hey, now I'm out of a job. So before we get to the last question, where can people find out more about Adaptive Challenge Consulting? Where can they get that info?
Yeah. So go to adaptivechallengeconsulting.com. My books are available there. But then also LinkedIn. If you want to find Alan Mueller on LinkedIn or Adaptive Challenge Consulting on LinkedIn, we're also on Instagram and Facebook. So we're on the other social media too, but LinkedIn is where we're a little more.
This is your big one, yeah.
Yeah, because it's sort of, when you're in a consulting business, that's
exactly
sort of
the place to be.
Yeah.
You're not going to find any consulting leads probably on Facebook or
on Instagram so much. Yeah, but I'm so present there because part of it's not just about getting leads and getting gigs. Yeah. Part of it's just about spreading good information about leadership too.
No, I was just going to say that too. I I had seen some of your videos and stuff on there, but I think it's great for you, if you get out and just, you're truly passionate at what you do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm not, bullshitting you, great talker, this,
Yeah.
you've been on the stage for 10 years with improv,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's it's great to see somebody that, like you said, you were living, the 9 to 5 or the 9 to 9, and now you're out there doing your own thing on your own terms, making, your own money now, not worrying about, hey, is this check going to come in or is it not going to come in? You get to pick and choose who you work with and who you work for, but you're also spreading the whole thing of leadership,
Yeah.
shaping and molding the future of this country, future of these corporations. And it's great. I think you're doing an awesome job. So to close this out, what does it truly mean to lead with humanity today?
It means not forgetting that every single one of us is connected. There's a great writer, and I don't read a lot of books. Well, let me take that back. I read a lot of books once upon a time, but I don't read a lot of fiction books. There's a great book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom.
Oh.
He's famous for Tuesdays with Morrie. That was his big famous.
Yeah.
But Mitch Albom he was a sports writer for the Detroit Free Press. He was also on ESPN a little bit. And in The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, I'm not going to spoil the book, but obviously somebody dies at the beginning and they meet 5 people in heaven. And the lesson is we're all a lot more connected than you think.
Yeah.
And if you remember that we're all a lot more connected than you think, how you treat your team member who annoys you changes. How you treat your team member who's of a different political affiliation from you changes. How you treat somebody who's a different race or gender than you changes. Once you remember that we're all connected, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge. So Dr. Mueller, brother, thank you. Thank you for giving us your time,
Yeah.
heart, and your wisdom. You didn't just talk leadership today. You showed us what it looks like. You reminded us that leadership isn't about titles, power, or prestige. It's about relationships, presence, and emotional honesty. To everyone listening, take this conversation with you. Take the reminder that emotional intelligence isn't something you learn once. It's something you practice every day. Take the truth that you can lead from wherever you are, whatever your story is, whatever your past looks like. And remember this, the world doesn't need more perfect leaders. It needs more human ones. Leaders who listen, leaders who reflect, leaders who show up with the courage and heart, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm Uncle Jimmy. This is Uncle Jimmy's podcast, and I want you to walk out of this episode believing that you are capable of leading with emotional intelligence, starting today. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and stay human. Peace and love, Uncle Jimmy out.
Awesome, man. We did it. We did it.